Hey everyone, so in my last video I talked about the Analogue Pocket. I just talked about how much I really personally enjoyed this console. However, I did not recommend this console for everyone in the last video for a variety of reasons. Some of the main ones just tend to be availability. Price is quite high if you're only looking for one or two features of this console. And then also the last thing that I feel like didn't get talked about enough is that it doesn't play anything really past the Super Nintendo era or Sega Genesis era, just due to the fact that it's missing like some, buttons on it. So you couldn't play everything on it, but for the purposes I used it for, I loved it a lot. However, I wanted to give some alternatives to those of you that did want to get a kind of classic console, but wanted to get something that was more in line with what you wanted. First off, in terms of price, because again, I will acknowledge the Analogue Pocket, especially if you're paying for scalper prices, is ridiculously expensive. I do not recommend paying a scalper for an Analogue Pocket. However, if you want to get something a little bit cheaper, there are a few solutions that we're going to go over. And when I say a few solutions, I really mean just two. Basically, either getting a modded Game Boy or a one of these emulation devices. Let's go over the modded Game Boy really quick, because I feel like that's going to be a little bit easier to talk about, because these things have been around for a long time. There are videos, countless videos really, of people modding their Game Boy Advances to be more in line with more modern screens, maybe replacing damaged shells, basically making the product look almost brand new. This is my original Game Boy Advance AGS001 model, which just basically means that there was a front light on it, and because of that it was kind of hard to go back and play those games on an AGS001 screen, and I was able to mod this Game Boy to put an AGS101 screen into an AGS001 model. It was fairly easy to do. There are plenty of great tutorials on YouTube. I'll actually link one below in case you guys were interested in getting a Game Boy Advance model and updating the screen. And there's other Game Boy Advance models you can mod as well. You don't necessarily have to do the SP. You can do the original Game Boy Advance. I personally just enjoy having this model just because of how compact and portable it is, and it's still able to play the physical cartridges of my game. So if you're just looking to play physical cartridges for Game Boy Advance games, I would actually just go for a modded Game Boy Advance. Don't even look at the Analogue Pocket if this is the only thing you want to do. It doesn't necessarily need to be an SP. It can be a regular Game Boy Advance model that will allow you to play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance titles all in the same system, and you'll be able to play the physical cartridges. Now, there are some downsides going this direction, right? One, again, you are limited to just playing physical cartridges. There's not really a way to play ROMs. You're not going to be able to play Super Nintendo games unless they were remade for the Game Boy Advance, and other games as well for like maybe Sega Genesis or anything like that. They're really restricted to Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance titles on this system, just because that's what the hardware was meant to play. Another thing is that if you specifically go for the Game Boy Advance model, one, it's not going to have a headphone jack, so you might have to get a connector that could possibly damage the port, and that creates a whole other set of issues that you probably don't want to go down under. The screen is not going to be as good as the Analogue Pocket. Personally, I still think that this system has like the best screen out of all the systems that I have. However, I will say that this one is not bad at all, and if you do want that classic experience, this is going to be the way to go. Now, this part is going to be quite interesting, because if you just wanted to play just old classic games and you didn't really care about having the physical cartridges being playable, and you just wanted to play ROMs and just revisit those games, then I would actually recommend a portable emulator. This system I have here is the Abernic RG405V, and this system is actually quite great. I actually really love the build quality of this. I chose this wood model just because I felt like it had a really nice finish. It has two analog sticks, two extra sets of shoulder buttons for PS2 and GameCube and Wii games, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And the nice thing is that you can always put more games through an SD card slot, so that's great. Charges with USB-C, has a headphone jack, and it's a quite an impressive system. I personally paid about like $180 for this, so it was almost the same price as an Analogue Pocket. This is what I was kind of playing around with before my Analogue Pocket came in, and I really enjoyed using the system. However, there are some negatives to this as well, right? Playing strictly ROMs on these sorts of systems while nice, sometimes don't work exactly as expected. Like just playing with emulators on systems like this there's some extra glitches, some extra bugs that can be produced. There's always going to be some sort of quirks with emulators. And I know a lot of people say that they work fairly well, and I totally believe you. For the most part, I do agree with you that they work fairly well. It just, for me personally, there's things that I notice, and I'm just very picky with that sort of stuff. So it's definitely a me problem. Not everybody's gonna agree with that. Another thing is that, again, just putting these side by side, this is quite a bit wider, and it's kind of nice because you have this kind of like giant screen, but this is not pocketable at all, where I am actually, as big as this is actually, I'm still able to put it in my pocket. They do include like a screen protector on this, and the quality of the screen is actually quite nice. It's just a really, really solid IPS LCD screen, and I think that's really good. I will say the user interface for this particular console is quite nice, and there's plenty of these types of consoles on the market. So I would say you're actually also able to really go in depth with the kind of games that you want to get in here. They do have Nintendo Wii, Nintendo GameCube, and also PS2 games that are available on this, and that's impressive, don't get me wrong, but they don't run quite well, and I would never play like Kingdom Hearts 2 on this console just because of how slow it runs. But other games, like maybe from Sega Dreamcast, is actually very impressive on this console, and I've gotten pretty far in Sonic Adventure 2 on this console, and that has been really cool. I guess the other benefit is that, which I actually kind of had as a con at first, was that it ran Android. But because it does run Android, you can actually download Android games on this as well. So it is an alternative. I will say, if you don't care about playing the physical cartridges and you can get by with some bugs in your games, maybe, or some things that are just like quirky, then I think this is a great alternative. And if you wanted to continue to wait for maybe an even better, portable handheld, they are just coming out with these like crazy. Like, I feel like every single week they have a new portable handheld, and that's cool in a sense because you know that it's going to consistently get better. On the downside, you never feel like you're getting the best product. You always feel like maybe you're just like one generation behind. But overall, I really enjoy the portable handheld system, and I will continue to use this, I'm sure, at some point in the future. I hope that this gave you some ideas of what you can do. Just to recap really quick, if you want to play hardware, original hardware with the original console, get a modded Game Boy. If you just want to play old classic games and you don't really care about playing physical hardware, then just get a portable emulator. And if you want to do it all and maybe a little bit more and have the best experience possible, I think get an Analogue Pocket. If you don't think this is worth that price though, then I would say the other two are just fantastic options. I was playing on a modded Game Boy for many years before getting an Analogue Pocket, and I'll probably go back to it if I'm feeling nostalgic enough. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you guys for taking the time to listen to me talk about this kind of stuff, and until next time, take care.